Going to look at how to write an essay for an inspector calls. You will be asked to answer either a question relating to a character or a thematic question. I'm going to be answering this thematic question about how far Priestley presents male characters as irresponsible. Now, the best way to start an essay is to plan it. I've decided to separate it into the characters and say whether I think that they were irresponsible or not irresponsible. So, as you can see on my plan, I've decided that Mr. Burling is completely irresponsible, the inspector is completely responsible, and Eric and Gerald are somewhere in the middle. Now, it's really important when you're making your plan that you understand that all these characters are concepts. Mr. Burling represents capitalism, Eric represents the young, Gerald represents the establishment, and the inspector represents socialism. Now, do not make the mistake of referring to these characters as if they are people. They're not people, they don't actually exist. Priestley created them for a purpose, and it's up to you to figure out why. Why has he presented some characters as irresponsible? Why has he presented some characters as prejudiced? And you have to relate it to his purpose, which is to show that capitalism is bad and socialism is the way forward. Now, the first thing you need to do is create your thesis statement. This is basically a sort of an outline of what you're going to be looking at in your essay. Now, the way to start your thesis statement is by naming the name of the play or novel, saying who wrote it, and then restating the question as a point. After that, taking from the plan, we're going to give 3 points. So my first is Mr. Burling is completely irresponsible. Then I talk about the inspector who's the opposite, and then that third one will be about Eric and Gerald. Now, just as I have outlined in my thesis statement, I'm going to start with Arthur Burling. Now, this is one whole paragraph, but I've broken it into its pieces so you can understand what should be in each paragraph. Now, we need to start with our point. Now, you can see that my point is quite chunky. I have treated this as a concept, and I'm trying to back up why I think that he's irresponsible. So I basically just outline all of the things that I think are irresponsible. And then I've gone in with some evidence. Now, you can layer quotes, but just for clarity, just to show you what you should have in each paragraph, I've just chosen one. So I've said about the fact that Mr. Burling felt it was his duty to keep wages low. And then as the technique, I've talked about it being an abstract noun, and then I go into explain it. Now, the last thing, very necessary, is to relate it to the author's purpose. Now, what is it that Priestley was trying to achieve here? And really, the entire play is for the purpose of conveying the idea that capitalism is bad and socialism is good. Now, on that previous page, I talked about techniques, and you've got to remember that it's not just word classes or literary techniques that we're looking at. There are other methods that playwrights can use to convey their message. So, for example, you might want to talk about stage directions. For example, when Mr. Burling is talking about his capitalist ideology, that is the moment that the inspector interrupts. And the lighting as well, the sort of soft, pink and intimate lighting, which changes to hard for the interrogation. Also, the structure of the play. Remember that it is not chronological. What actually happens in the real chronology of the time is that Eric meets Eva before his mother. However, the play is structured so that Eric is the last character, which really builds up that tension. He also uses dramatic irony so that the audience know just how awful Mr. Burling is and how his point of view is somewhat limited. And then after that, if you can't use any of those big techniques, talk about word classes, talk about the use of pronouns as well. What does that suggest? So what I just showed you was an example just to show you what should be included in each paragraph. However, you're going to need more than one quote to prove your point. So I've included a copy of an essay that I have written in answer to this question, and you'll see that I've sort of layered up quotes and analysed those quotes. I then go on and use a variety of explanations, techniques. If possible, try to use stage directions as well. I haven't been able to include it in this essay, but obviously all the methods that Priestley used are important. And then if I had had more time, I would have gone on to give a bit more of an explanation about Gerald, although I really do think that it's Eric who is the most important final character here, because he's the one who changes. In conclusion, I basically restate my 3 points and then relate it to the overall concept of why Priestley was doing this thing.